How's it going, everyone? I am the Shaz here with the next video in the card analysis series, bringing you a video on the first round of Muse Fest cards. Why this next in the series? Well, to be honest, I wanted to get you a video on both of the upcoming first anniversary boxes so that you have a good idea of what to expect in each box. Though with the accelerated global schedule, I must note that this is subject to change. I will go over what was in the JP version of the first anniversary boxes, then close out with the cards from each group that were excluded. The first Muse Fest card that was released was Rose Maki, or Maki 2. Coming during the first Fest banner, this card was widely regarded as the weakest on the banner. An elegant attribute guard type, at Limit Break 0, she starts with a very low 3306 base appeal, a massive 8259 base stamina, and 4953 base technique, giving her a 14.57% crit rate. Her tap active is the weakest for all guard type cards, damage reduction, with Maki reducing 13% of the damage taken for the next 10 notes at skill level 3. Her passive is average, giving a stamina buff to all cards in her strategy by 6% at skill level 3, and her live show active, if activated at the beginning of an appeal chance, grants a shield equal to 10% of her large stamina pool, with this skill activating at a 40% rate. The evaluation on this card hasn't changed since its release. Its primary focus is to be a stamina stick. At max limit break, she boasts the highest base stamina in the game at 14,790, though that only edges out cards like FES Nico, FES Ruby, and FES Shizuku by a few hundred. However, those three cards have something that Maki doesn't, a way to keep your stamina in the green, which makes those three better than FES Maki for frontline sustain duties. This card is still useful for voltage runs during SBL and exchange events, as her large stamina pool allows her to team up with cards like Initial Chika and Initial Honoka to create a beefy stamina pool that allows you to do your voltage runs without a frontline sustain card. Lastly, as with all FES cards, this card having a maximum of 4 insight slots means that, if you're lucky, this card can provide a maximum of 8% appeal boost to all other cards in your formation if you're able to get 4 appeal plus medium group insights on her, which helps offset some of the downsides of this card. The second Muse Fest card, which came during the infamous Festina banner, was Angel Kotori, or Koto 2. An elegant attribute SP type card, she was met with mixed reviews upon her initial release. At Limit Break 0, she sports 6210 base appeal, 3859 base stamina, and 6726 base technique, which leaves her with a 34.78% crit rate, trailing only FES Hanayo and FES Ellie for her highest crit rate among elegant attribute URs at Limit Break 0. Her tap active is pretty unique, as it increases the SP gauge gain of just other elegant attribute cards by a whopping 18% for the next 10 notes at skill level 3. Her passive also only affects same attribute cards, increasing their technique by 4.6% at skill level 3. Her live show active is admittedly pretty weak, as it only activates upon switching strategies and increases the voltage of the next SP gauge by 20% of her own appeal, with this LSA activating at a 30% rate. FES Kotori is pretty limited in what she can do, but she does it well. If you build your team correctly, this card can help you cycle through a massive amount of SP gauges. Combining this card with Initial Yohane and FES Ellie gives you a high crit rate main scoring strategy with not only 2 gauge fill tap actives, but a gauge gain tap active as well. If all 3 of those cards are at max limit break, this strategy boasts cards all with an over 50% crit rate, 2 9% gauge fill tap active cards, and FES Kotori that will boost the regular gauge gain from each tap by a staggering 20% per tap, not including any bonuses that you may be getting from your bond boards. The next Muse Fest card from the third Fest banner was Angel Nico, or Nico 3. A Smile attribute guard type card, she still sees a lot of use today, even on the JP server. At Limit Break 0, She starts with 4702 base appeal, 7895 base stamina, and 4198 base technique, leaving her with a very low 12.35% crit rate. Her tap active was the introduction of the overpowered FES Sustain card, as at skill level 3, she provides a heal based on 34% of her stamina. Her passive, on the other hand, is quite weak, as it only increases the stamina of other guard type cards by 4.6% at skill level 3. Her live show active has a chance to activate anytime you take 500 damage or more, and if it does, will provide you with a stamina heal equal to 5% of her stamina, though this skill only activates at a 10% rate. The upside of this skill is that, much like Initial Yo, because it activates upon damage taken, this LSA has an ability to trigger even if she's not in your main scoring strategy, making her great to team up with Initial Yo on songs like Kowareyaski. This Nico, by and large, is considered to be one of the best defensive sustain cards in the game, along with FES Ruby and FES Hanamaru. I exclude FES Mari because she does have offensive parts about her kit. Even if you do have healers better than her, she still makes for a fantastic stamina stick backliner and, as pointed out earlier, a key piece for songs that deal a lot of damage per note, like Wonderful Rush, Landing Action Yeah, and Mitai Ken Horizon. The next FES card release was FES Hanayo, also known as FES Pana or Pana 4. Another elegant attribute card, this one with SK typing. She is a bona fide frontline scorer. At Limit Break 0, she has 6321 base appeal, 3927 base stamina, and 6840 base technique, giving her a 35.12% crit rate, the second highest for the elegant attribute at Limit Break 0. Her tap active is one of the best for frontline scoring, giving an appeal boost to all cards in her strategy by 8% at skill level 3. Her passive provides an appeal buff to other elegant attribute cards by 4.6% at skill level 3, and her live show active, if activated on one of her taps, increases the crit rate of all cards in the same strategy by 10%, though only for the next 3 notes. This skill also only activates at a 20% rate, so on average will activate once every 15 notes, or on average 10 times during a 150 note song. While only truly maximized in an all-elegant scoring strategy, this Pana still packs a punch, allowing her to be a very good frontline scorer at higher limit breaks. Even if she isn't in a fully on-attribute frontline strategy, it just means you're missing out on her passive, since her tap active increases appeal of same strategy cards regardless of attribute. At max limit break, she only chose FES Ellie and FES Kanata for the best Center 3 member in the elegant attribute. While there are better scores in the attribute than her, mainly FES Kanata, you shouldn't be disappointed pulling this card, as she has a lot of potential for team compositions with future card releases. The next FES banner gave us FES Umi, also known as Umi 4 or Moonlit Umi. A natural attribute SP type, this card has an interesting set of abilities that make her pretty unique. At Limit Break 0, she starts with 6156 base appeal, 3762 base stamina, and a massive 7182 base technique, giving her a 36.12% crit rate. This trails only FES Emma and the upcoming FES Nozomi for the highest crit rate in the attribute at Limit Break 0. Her tap active is the SP Gauge Bomb, providing a voltage boost equal to a massive 39% of her appeal on the next SP gauge at skill level 3. Her passive is pretty limited, as it only provides a technique boost to other natural attribute cards by 4.6% at skill level 3. Her live show active, if activated on her own taps, adds 1% of her enormous technique stat to the SP gauge as a gauge fill, though this only activates at a 15% rate, or roughly 1 in every 6 of her taps. This card does one thing very well, and that is crit. Her high technique stat, if you get multiple copies of her, only goes up, and at max limit break she ends up with a whopping 52.8% crit rate before the addition of any technique buffs. Considering her passive provides one, she procs critical taps at a roughly 55% rate after you include just her passive. She is also a bit of a hybrid card, as she provides both a gauge bomb and a small amount of gauge fill, which, if you're trying out the gauge fill plus crit strat, can work wonders for scoring on certain songs. The only downside to her kit is her tap active in my opinion. Having it tied to her appeal means that it doesn't get any help from her passive, which buffs her best stat, her technique. Other than that, this is an above average FES card, and one of the best for natural attribute Center 3. The next card we will go over is FES Ellie, also known as Ellie 4 or True Arabesque Ellie. Another elegant attribute card, this time with SP typing. At Limit Break 0, she starts with 5814 base appeal, 3585 base stamina, and a massive 7689 base technique, giving her a staggering 37.61% crit rate. This crit rate is the third highest among all cards in the game at Limit Break 0, narrowly trailing FES Emma and the upcoming FES Nozomi. Her tap active is an SP gauge fill, giving an 8% fill of the gauge at skill level 3. Her passive is pretty narrow, as it provides a technique buff for other third years by 4.6% at skill level 3. Her live show active, if activated at the beginning of an appeal chance, gives a voltage boost for the next SP gauge by 15% of her own appeal, with this skill activating at a 50% rate. After 50 10 pulls over 2 accounts and having to spark this card twice, I'm still glad I got this card, even though she is currently at Limit Break 0 for me. Eventually, I will max Limit Break her, where she will end up with over 10k base appeal and a close to 57% crit rate. While on the surface, this card may not seem as strong as something like FES Emma, after breaking down the stats, the two are very similar. In fact, in comparing FES Ellie to FES Emma, Ellie has the higher base appeal by about 1000, with Emma having a marginally better crit rate. Pairing these two cards along with something like Detective Hanayo or FES Kasumi makes for an absolutely insane single strategy crit plus gauge fill composition. This card is also one of the best to put in your Center 3 for elegant attribute songs, as her huge technique value can do wonders for your scoring if you're able to cycle through enough gauges. Next on the list we have FES Rin, also known as Rin 5 or Palm Rin. A cool attribute SP type, this card is in many ways similar to another card of the same attribute and typing, FES Karen. At Limit Break 0, she starts with 6073 base appeal, 4682 base stamina, and 6596 base technique, giving her a 34.4% crit rate. In the attribute, this card currently has the 5th highest crit rate at Limit Break 0, trailing Initial Yo and a few other cards yet to be released on the global server. Her kit is where she gets the comparisons to FES Karen, specifically her tap active. Both share an SP Gauge Bomb tap active, but where Karen's is 31% of her high appeal, Rin's is 39% of her appeal at skill level 3, meaning that on average, she will add more voltage to the SP gauge on her tap active than Karen will. Her passive is an appeal boost to all other first years by 4.6% at skill level 3, making her a situational backliner. Her live show active is also quite restrictive, which, if activated at the beginning of an AC, increases the SP gauge gain of all cool attribute cards by a whopping 24%, but only for the next 5 notes, and with this skill activating at a 35% rate. Though the card is good, I wouldn't necessarily put it into gotta have territory. With a significantly lower appeal than FES Karen, this means that attempting to score with this card becomes a bit of an RNG fest. In addition, while her passive is situationally good, you'll normally have her as a last resort backliner, as there are many other cards with a better combination of passive plus live show active. After skipping a FES banner, the next Muse card was FES Honoka, also known as Honoka 5 or Cosmic Driver Honoka. A Smile attribute voltage type, this card is an above average scorer, and her idolized art has a wonderful reference to the Cyber set from SIF. She is also the only voltage type out of the first run of Muse Fest cards. At Limit Break 0, she starts off with 6954 base appeal, 3993 base stamina, and 6430 base technique, giving her an 18.91% crit rate. Her tap active is one of, if not the best for frontline scoring, as it increases the appeal of all cards in the same strategy by 8% for the next 5 notes at skill level 3, activating at the standard rate. Her passive, also the best for frontliners, increases the appeal of all cards in the same strategy by 6% at skill level 3. Her live show active is the weakest part of her kit, however, granting 100% of her appeal as voltage at the beginning of a live. While not fully fitting into the growing Smile first year scoring pool, this card still stands on her own, though she does get overshadowed by another Smile attribute voltage type coming out in the future. Unfortunately, like most other cards with the same passive, if you're not running her as part of your main scoring strategy, it is impossible to defend backlining her, since she only boosts the appeal of cards in her strategy. The final of the first run of Muse Fest cards is FES Nozomi, which comes after the FES Kanan banner, and thus, on JP, was not on the first Anniversary FES Muse banner. A natural attribute SP type card, this card has some similarities to FES Kotori. At Limit Break 0, Nozomi starts with 6181 base appeal, 3701 base stamina, and 7774 base technique, giving her the second highest crit rate of all cards in the game at Limit Break 0. Her kit of abilities, however, are extremely limited. Her tap active increases the SP gauge gain of natural attribute cards by a staggering 30% for the next 5 notes at skill level 3. Her passive increases the technique of other natural attribute cards by 4.6% at skill level 3. Finally, her live show active, upon appeal chance completion, increases the voltage of the next SP gauge by 7.5% of her own appeal. This Nozomi, as I have mentioned several times in the video, is an amazing crit card, with her crit rate just under 56% at max limit break before any technique buffs. She is also the best card to run in your center 3 for most songs, as her extremely high technique stat and her above average appeal makes for a very large SP gauge pop. This also may be stating the obvious, but this card has an amazing composition that, if you have the cards, could be one of the highest scoring frontlines in the game. FES Nozo, FES Emma, FES Umi. Nozo's gauge gain, Emma's gauge fill, and Umi's gauge bomb, in addition to each of their high crit rates, would combo for some insanely high scores, especially for songs like Bokura no Live, Kimito no Life. Overall, here is a breakdown of the typings that will most likely be on the first Anniversary FES Muse banner. 1 voltage type, Honoka, 2 guard types, Maki and Nico, 4 SP types, Kotori, Umi, Ellie, Rin, and 1 SK type, Hanayo. As far as attributes, they break down like this: 2 Smile, Nico and Honoka, 0 Pure, 1 Cool, Rin, 0 Active, 1 Natural, Umi, and 4 Elegant, Maki, Kotori, Hanayo, and Ellie. While there are a lot of good cards on the banner, there aren't a lot of what I would consider game breaker cards that would show up on the first Anniversary banner. While I do think the third year Fest cards are very good, with likely only 2 of them on the banner, and the rest of the Muse cards being average or overshadowed by other cards in the near future, if you do plan on sparking that banner, I would suggest spending your gems on the FES Aqua banner. The reason for this? The shiny quartz pieces that allow you to pick out a free UR are shared between both banners. This means that if you do 25 10 pulls on the FES Aqua banner and got everything you wanted, you could spend the shiny quartz pieces to then spark whichever FES Muse card you want. Alternatively, you could split the 25 10 pulls between the two banners, but that's all up to you. This concludes our FES Muse card analysis. Hopefully, this video, coupled with the upcoming FES Aqua card analysis, will give you an informed decision on which banner will be better for you to pull on. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to do all the shit the YouTubers ask you to do. Like, comment, subscribe, notification bell, yada yada yada. I am the Shaz, take it easy, be nice to each other, and I'll see you all next time.